Enter Tales of the Unreal, Volume 2, Number 2, Edition Numero Dos. The latest anthology of weird fiction by authors from across the internet, published by Unreal Press. It's a collection of short stories. I believe it's an homage or a reiteration of a earlier series that published weird fiction. I don't know the full details, I just know it is a series of weird fiction stories, and these are by my peers. These are the writers of the day, so I feel that I should, talk about them and tell you which ones I liked and which one I thought were the misses. I effectively read it so you don't have to, but really I'm just going to tell you which stories I liked and that maybe you will enjoy reading on your own time. I'm not even sure who the Unreal Press are exactly. I've never been able to fully wrap my head around who it is that makes up that collective, what their actual goals are. As far as I'm concerned, they're just a literary union of people just banding together trying to get a brand going, and they have ties to the Irish Mafia. I don't care, that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about the stories in order of appearance, because they got 17 authors. 17 tales of the Unreal, to be specific. Some names I recognize, some are new. Let's go through them. Our opening act is by Palmer Adams, The Water Nymph, the story that inspires the cover of this book. The cover seems to be AI generated because the water nymph is described a couple times, and she doesn't look like a 1920s flapper like I'm looking at on the cover. It must be an AI generated image. It's still good though, it's still a nice cover. Captures that old 20th century weird fiction serial aesthetic perfectly, and it's a bit of a step up from the first cover. Maybe they perfected the AI prompt, I don't know. Our first story is about a man whose father goes missing, and he begins an investigation with his useless siblings because they don't really appear in the story, but this man is out to find his missing father. And speaking of capturing the aesthetic of early 20th century weird fiction, well, this story also does it. This first story really does capture the feelings of Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft. It reads like the account of a man going to Innsmouth. There's even a town he goes to. He goes to Arkhamville, which, a little on the nose, I think you could have been more clever with the name, but it serves. He goes to Arkhamville because he finds a clue. His father was a painter, and his father, I like it. It's like the Lovecraft spiral of insanity. Like, I found my father's journal, his paintings. His paintings are getting more corrupt, closer to the day he goes missing. He becomes obsessed with what appears to be a woman from a lake, the water nymph. Perhaps that's trophy, but I always love just like scenes in movies of like a character going through artwork portfolios, and it just gets more and more, black and scribbly and obsessive. It's cool. And the father's journal likewise becomes more erratic and occulty. It's just like he's like writing in runes by the end, and it's like just scribbles of this woman from the lake. And to the lake he goes. He tracks down the village his father would have had to go through to get to the lake. And just like Lovecraft, the village is described as backwaters. The people seem dull there. Something is off. He recruits 2 guides from there, and they give him the cold shoulder whenever he asks them questions. They're just doing their job, keeping to themselves. So he's got this basically isolated while being led out into the woods. What I like about the journey to the lake is during the day, the flowers are described as kind of alien to him. They're beautiful. There's a beautiful landscape foliage, something kind of otherworldly he's never seen before. And in contrast, during the night, it becomes more sinister. He has trouble sleeping. He has nightmares. He hears a woman singing in the distance, and it gets stronger as they get closer to the lake. And eventually they reach a bridge. The fabled, if you cross that bridge, you don't return. The guys refuse to cross it. Guy laughs him off, crosses the bridge, everything intensifies. Like, it becomes more of a strange land. And one of my favorite lines from the entire book is right here. I felt I had traveled back in time to when the world was ruled by older and crueler things. That's a cool line. That's the best line of the story there. He follows the melody and he arrives at the lake. And at the lake appears the water nymph. She is described as being a giant woman, the most beautiful he's ever seen. She extends out her massive palm to him. She says, "Please, come into the lake. I have something to show you." It's like get in the van. Come into the lake. I have some candy for you. And the lake appears to be beautiful, deep and blue, and he's being lured. She's like a siren. He's being enchanted, and he's walking into the water, and something in his brain just, warning, just triggers him like something is wrong. Like that last ditch effort you might feel when like something isn't right. And he snaps out of it. And when he snaps out of it, he snaps out of the spell. He sees what she really is. Gone is the fair maiden of the lake, trying to be gentle and motherly, luring him in. Now she is revealed as this massive, monstrous, hag-looking thing. And the lake, I like this too. The lake also changes. It's no longer deep and crystal. It's shallow. It is shallow water. So shallow he can see the bodies in the puddle. He sees how men are lured here to drown at her feet. And he sees the body of his father amid the pile in the lake. And so he runs. He runs as fast as he's ever ran. He runs the entire 3-day march through the woods, just getting away from her. Though he escapes, he is still haunted by what he experienced. He can't get her out of his head. He's traumatized. He's still under the spell, so to speak. He ends his account by expressing he can't get over her. He is returning to the lake. He is, just as his father became obsessed with her, he is returning to her to put an end to the suffering, his obsession, his suffering. He's returning to her to die. It makes for a pretty cool story. It instills faith that, hey, this book is going to have some good stories in it. It actually, for me personally, reminded me, hey, I give a lot of shade to Lovecraft, but Lovecraft is fun for a reason, and this is a very Lovecraftian story, just like how most of your main characters die or go insane at the end. It concludes the same way. Now, this story, continuing this theme, it could have taken place in the 1920s. There's no indication it takes place in the 2020s. No discussion of cellular devices or even televisions. So it definitely goes for that Lovecraft feeling, and it does it well. A fine opening act by a closeted giantess fetishist. The only thing I might have done differently was perhaps years go by, and then the obsession returns to be more of a reflection of the father in the cycle. This was a good story to open on. The people who made this book knew that. They featured the first story wisely. And they followed it up with a banger, because next is Alex Bayman's Vantablack. Now this story is a downer, but it's also wicked cool. It's about a man who goes to the hospital for some sort of medical evaluation treatment. They put him in a hyperbolic chamber, sealed airtight. And then the end of the world happens. In his little chamber, he has a window. He can see out of the hospital. He can see out to the world. And all of a sudden, he notices the sky goes black. The sun is out, but the sky is black. The leaves on the trees no longer sway. There's no wind, he realizes. The people walking out there are grabbing at their throats, their skin. They're suffocating. They're dying. A couple's walking down across the street, and they just drop dead. The nice nurse he was talking to earlier, she comes up to the door. There's a window in the door. She's pounding at it. Her skin is boiling. She's trying to get in. Something horrible is happening. And he's just useless. He's sitting there. The world has come to an end. And by God, I don't know if I would have figured it out, but he's able to deduce that just the air in the world has been sucked out. We've just become an airless planet. What a horrific thing to imagine. And so it becomes the final reflections of a man just in this terrible position of, I'm trapped in a tiny room with some of the last air on the planet. And he's just sitting there, just thinking about what happened. Like, I imagine it's like that solar flare that's going to happen and wipe out all, internet and technology. And it's like something scientific is going to happen. And if you're just a guy that happens to be caught in a pocket of air, how are you going to be able to figure out what really went down? You're just stuck there, you're going to die. And that's what this story is. He just sits there, and he's like, I wonder what else. Wonder who else is trapped like me. And it's a cool character here, because he comes up with some clever, observations. Like, the astronauts would still be up there, looking at this doomed planet. Who else is stuck in positions like me? Who else is on airplanes, before they take off? Those people might still be alive. And wouldn't that suck, being trapped with a bunch of strangers trying to figure out, what happened? It's a smart read. It's well written. I really enjoyed this story. I was hopeful, there's gotta be something he figures out, but no, he's just screwed. And he knows he's only got 3 days in there, and he's running out of his brownie that he was left. And he's like, alright, I'm going to die one way or the other. And eventually he chooses to go out on his own terms. He breaks open the door. He uses all his might to barge open the door. All the air gets sucked out. He can already feel his skin burning. He sees the nurse that died at the door. And there's a sentimental ending where he just picks up her body. he walks out. Earlier, the nurse mentions, oh, there was a clown coming in for some children or something, and of course he sees the clown with the broken balloons out there. The clown's dead. He's like, there's a cool line. Even now, I'm smiling as he's like burning, cooking inside, dying. There's also a really cool line like, no one's ever going to decompose anymore. There's no air. But he's taking the nurse out, carrying her out of the hospital. He lays her down out in the grass, and he just lies down with her, accepting his death. He grabs her hand, and he sheds a tear. He sheds a tear that boils on his skin. It's a good story. It is the best story of the book. You must read Vanta Black yourself, because this story just kept making me think. It was a story that just provoked me to think about this situation, this super bad situation. I continue to think about it. Like, what if suddenly the air returned in some impossible fashion? He does survive. That would be a cool post-apocalyptic setting. Like, what would the survivors do with this cooked, 99% of life dead planet? The people getting off those airtight airplanes and people in his position. Just, what is there to do now in this miserable world? Side note, it captures that energy of despair, that end-of-the-world feeling of Remina Hellstar by Junji Ito. Take my end-of-the-world survivors twist, this could have been chapter 1 to a novel. It's a great story. And now I must confess to you, there are 3 stories in this book that I could not finish. Our third story, Sleep of the Diviner, by Sophis, was one of them. Actually, I did read this one to the end, but this is just a story that went over my head. Some of the stories I can go on at great length for, and some of them I'm just going to have to brush off my shoulder and move on. This is going to have to be one of them. Now, this story isn't necessarily bad. It's experimental, which is good. This is weird fiction, and this is definitely a story that tried to go for that angle. In fact, Sophis is a good writer. I encourage you to go look into this story because it filtered me. It went over my head, so I'm asking you to give it its fair shot. It's written in second person. It's basically an account of a dream, a nightmare, as the description says. So, again, experimental. It just wasn't for me. I ended up having to read it in my head in the voice of the narrator from Disco Elysium, because it was similar in that aspect, but that's carrying it at that point. So, it's still cool, but I can't give it a fair assessment just because I was lost. I was lost in this one, I'm sorry. Too weird for the weird, but please consider reading this one, see what I couldn't figure out. No, I take it back, not too weird for the weird. Sophis, I have simply failed you. I feel I'm not allowed to discuss it because I just didn't get it, but I will say this. It feels like the author had a nightmare or a dream, and they decided I'm going to try and capture and write about that experience. So conceptually, not bad at all. And then we're back with Before They Fall by V. Bellingham, which also might have been a better follow-up to Vanta Black, because of the subject matter. Here is The End of the World, another end-of-the-world story, from the perspective of someone more stuck out in it. I would also like to say now that many of the stories have certain parallels and similarities to one another. Creates nice symmetry with other stories. This one in Vanta Black, and I'll go into a few of the other combinations later. Now, Before They Fall is quite literally what they do before they fall and drop dead, because the world is ending. This time, we don't really know what's happening. It could be a meteor coming, some sort of ecological disaster about to make the planet explode, could be anything. Nuclear missiles coming, we don't know. We just have the perspective of someone that realizes, as well as everyone else, oh snap, world's gonna end, and he's just driving around thinking about what that means, what it means to die, what it means to die with the world, and he's just watching everyone else react. He sees people killing people just for the sake of it. There are orgies out in the streets, because what else is there to do in the end times? It is a good story. It's not good for his observations of what people are doing, because that was kind of it just there. It's more so what he's thinking. He's just thinking about, no matter how fast I drive, I can't outdrive what's coming, and he's just lamenting the life he lived. Like, oh, I spent all this time working. What were my hobbies good for in the end? I've had sex with 2 women. Can you imagine? What a loser. Though if we saw the Flash right now, I suppose we'd be thinking much like him. Oh snap, was that it? Was that life? That's it? And eventually the end comes in its flashy glory, and he's thinking of his daughter who he loves. And then what I like about this story is it ends with an even if ellipses. Like, oh, cut off. Dude was just thoughts running in his head, and now he's dead. Why I thought this was a good parallel to Vanta Black is like, well, imagine, I mean, obviously it's not the same symptomatic end of the world, but end of the world, we get to see someone experiencing that end of the world. So it's a nice compliment. Overall, to the point, written well. It was a short and sweet read. Next, we have Muriel's Intruder by K.R. Hartley, the man, the mind, the editor behind Lamp Magazine. As the editor, he writes the editor's notes, the opening notes to every magazine, and that is some of his best writing right there. Hartley is really good at just laying it all out. His writing is very good at just shooting the breeze, just talking it out, what's going on. It's just a fun style of writing about what's up, and rather bluntly. And blunt is what you'll get in this story, as it's much more action-packed than the previous somber ones. The story opens with a couple, lovebirds, looking at the ceiling, just laying there in the moment, thinking, oh, we should paint the ceiling, and then a clockwork orange strikes, and a man comes up to their door asking to use their phone. And it's always interesting trying to pinpoint what years these stories take place in. Because cell phone? Does he not have a cell phone? He's asking to use their phone. He's very desperate. I have to make a phone call, and they shoo him away. He goes. They threaten to call the police. No, don't call the police. They decide they'll call the neighbor Muriel, an older woman, like 80. Like, hey, there's a schizo out there. Watch out. And that's it. The whole story just becomes this old lady Muriel, like basically from Courage the Cowardly Dog, fending off this schizo trying to use her landline phone with a shotgun. It's a comedic piece, because it's just this old woman blasting a shotgun, destroying her house, trying to get this guy that breaks in to use her phone, which he does successfully use. He just snatches her phone just to make a call. She picks up another phone on the other line. Did you hear that? And I guess it's weird. It's just a weird, strange conflict of a man desperate to use a phone and an old woman trying to blast him in two pieces. As far as I read, he just genuinely wanted to use the phone. The whole conflict could have been avoided if they just brought him in and said, here, man, here's the phone, make the call. So it's hilarious how this artificial, vicious conflict just exploded. Perhaps a commentary on all conflict. It's a very fine story for what the hell did I just read. I prefer, like I said earlier, Hartley just laying the stuff out in his editor notes. A fine story, but I don't know, it's just a slice of sudden action, and that's it. That's purely it. Some of these stories really get you thinking, and this is more just fun pie in the face. Or shotgun in the face. Next, we have a very interesting follow-up. For we have, and forgive my French pronunciation of the name, we have L.A. Lebouchon's Colder Than Ice. Lebouchon? Lebouchon. Colder Than Ice is similar to Muriel's Intruder, as it's another just dense action piece. You know what? It's even more dense. It's even more action. It is just the meat grind, the pulp gore, I want to call it? The pulp gore just exacerbated. What I'm trying to say is it's more violent and more hardcore. The story claims it takes place in hell. I'd say it's just post-apocalyptic. It's just, it happens before they fall. It is after they fall. It is my alternate ending to Vanta Black, with people just living in this Fallout-esque wasteland. And hell does aptly describe it, because we're following a survivor just looking for food. And the story suggests that cannibalism is just all the rage. I guess people have to eat human flesh, or it's just the situation is so bad in this world, people are eating human flesh. Our main character is named Revere. A name like that would suggest to me that this has been a terrible world for some time, if you have a name like that, or you picked up a name like that. They monologue about how they're forgetting language. They just don't talk to people. They haven't talked to anyone in so long. Just like it's bad. It's just isolation, because they're a loner. They're a survivor. They're also described as redheaded and good taste Labouchon. I just imagine I'm just picturing, it's cool. It's a redheaded girl named Revere in the post-apocalyptic scenario. It's a cool setup. Reminds me of Katniss Everdeen from The Hunger Games, just with that kind of like in the grim future kind of feeling. And speaking of hunger, Revere is hungry to survive. They've stolen food from effectively a raider gang. Describes them as the Spiky people, and there's about, I think, 8 of them coming to kill her. So she's just fleeing from them. She has a gun with a few bullets, and I don't believe, from what I recall, they don't see that she has the gun. They just know they're chasing someone that took their food. And then they all have like blunt weapons, like a fire axe. Like they are just. They remind me of the movie Mandy with the that decked out gang on the bikes and 4-wheelers. Like they're like not quite Cenobites, but they're just screwed up people, like just twisted. Like one of them is described as like having a face with scars, but it's described as like oh, they kissed a weed whacker and went back for seconds. Like, that's pretty brutal. That's a brutal description. And just to summarize, this is just a story of Revere getting into like a gas station, trying to find shelter, and just like that's how it opens. Like they just run up to a door and they gotta think quick. Like, do I risk my life trying to find another way in the back? Just break in. You know, they're described as small. And they sneak in through the hole, and it's just I'm gonna fortify myself here and fend off these psychos. And that's the whole story. It's just and they start off with like an arrow sticking out of their back. It's metal. It's a really metal story. Because like one of them's got a crossbow. It is so Mad Max. And that's it. The whole story is just her holding up in this like little station, just trying to like fend them off. And there's tactics to it. It's like, okay, they don't know I have the gun, so that's an advantage. And like, you know, she shoots one of them. It's just such a good description. I really like, and that's what the story is. But like, I really like how this is written, and this is gonna make me sound so biased because Labouchon writes a lot like how I write, like with the not ellipses, the beautiful M dash. Lots of M dashes here, and starting sentences with the word "and." Which is good when you know how to do it correctly, and just the flare of violence. It gets me. This story that's just pure violence. Out of all the stories in this book, there's just a story of just a raw scene of violence and escalation and conflict reaching its natural conclusion. It is the stuff that I live for. This was one of my favorite stories in the book. It was just, I love throwing this word around a lot. It's just cool. It's better than that. This, as I said, this story is just metal. I liked this one. It feels like that. This is why I brought up the Hunger Games. This could be a chapter or a sample out of a book or a project that the author is working on. There feels like there is a world beyond this story. And again, that's why it's tough that it follows Muriel's Intruder, where both are just, here's some action and violence. This one was just the one I happen to prefer. So definitely read this one. After that, we have Roman Anthony's Ruby Dagger, the shortest story in this collection of short stories. And to say short and sweet is a pretty good summary. It really is just a short and sweet piece of, I would call it flash fiction, honestly, with how quick it is. I was able to definitely figure out the year with this one. This one comes off as kind of like a fantastical of all of them. This is the most like medieval-esque story. It's about a looter going into like a castle ruin, finds the corpse of a dead noble, pulls the ruby dagger out from his ribs, and it is just a ruby, a beautiful ruby with just a hilt on it. It's a dagger, and it's just about him going mad over this weapon. It suggests that the ruby is at its most beautiful radiance when bathed in blood, and you can imagine with this guy, how this guy loses his mind with this weapon and trying to keep it beautiful. I'm reminded of Anubis from Stardust Crusaders, just a cursed sword, and it's not quite the same thing in essence, but it's just the feeling I get. It's just a guy going crazy over a cursed weapon. It's good. Following our short story, we have the longest one. I think it's the longest one. It felt like the longest one is Saccharine by Amosai. This is one of the stories I didn't finish, so I can't really talk about it. I can't give it a fair assessment. Believe me, I know that I can't be the one to complain when something is written too long, and I don't think that was the issue here. It was more so there wasn't a hook. You need when you're a writer, you need a hook. You need something to lure the reader in, to make them want to keep reading. And for me personally, that wasn't there. I was just reading about a monk sweeping, talking about the discipline of sweeping, and I was like, oh my god. So yeah, it's the account of a monk, and I lost interest in this one. Now, people were saying there was controversy with this story, saying it has grammatical issues, but it was intentional because apparently the author wanted to feel like it was translated, like an Eastern translation. I didn't even get that feeling. I didn't even take beef with how it was written. I got bored. That's it. But this is the strength. This is the strength of anthologies. You lose interest in something, you just move on to the next one. So perhaps, we're gonna have to relook at this one, reevaluate, because it's getting done dirty. But I don't know. Wasn't for me. Moving right along, we move on to Donovan Hall's The Trees. And I like this one. This one is special because it is what I imagined I was getting out of this book going in. I expected just weird stories, schizophrenic stories, tales of the unreal. And There's been some good stories, absolutely, so far, but this is the first one that's just fully embracing it's weird, deal with it. Our main character is living in the city. He's in line with what I'm talking about here. He's pretty much just a schizo living in the city, and he's deathly afraid of trees. He just thinks trees are out to kill people, and that they frequently do kill people, that people die in tree-related accidents. It's just something that happens in his world. And there's a nice line in there to kind of like establish, I guess the logic he's running on. Like, trees are okay at the park in the city because they know their place. There's only so many of them. When you get out into the woods, though, and then it's anyone's game at that point. They will get you. So he's afraid of trees, but his sister, who's having a birthday party for, I believe it's her husband. It might have been a brother. There's a party he's got to go to for his sister. He does it for his sister's sake. He's going out for her, and she lives out in the country, so that's the catch. And it's like, I hate trees. I'm afraid of trees, but she's not gonna let it go if I don't go. So okay, I guess I'll go. And he takes like a 5-hour drive out from the city and through the woods to the house, because I guess the house was just bigger. He's like desperate. He's like, oh come on, we can host the party here. And it's like, no, the house isn't. We need a bigger house like out here. So he goes out to the party there. I got my book out. I'm reading this line that he hears on the news. He hears on the news, at 9:30 p.m. last night, the news reporter began, a man was killed while jogging in Deer Grove. Police say that he was slain by a belligerent tree. It's just... he's just clearly crazy. It reminds me of, just the schizo wackiness you encounter when watching Under the Silver Lake or Beau is Afraid. Yeah, the world is crazy. Cope with it. So first story for a truly genuine weird trip. The trees. Good stuff. Now I have the misfortune of reporting the next story, which is undoubtedly the trashiest, most god-awful, just angsty, thinks it's so good, sued-riddled, self-obsessed, self-righteous, nasty piece of... Oh my god, this book, this story, this next one. This next one is my favorite. Hexen and the Real Witch by Philip Hamilton. It's about this character, Hexen, that's his stage name. He's a musician, he's been really taking off in the last couple years. His whole aesthetic is like being a witch. So like he's really popular on TikTok, he's popular in Witch Talk. So he's had like, some songs take off. He's really like he's so popular with his like witch aesthetic that he goes for. He's caused a goth renaissance back in high school. Like, they're going goth again. He's popular with the 13 to 27-year-old age range. He sells witch hats at his concerts that he throws. Those are like his biggest item. He's finally wealthy after like being broke all his life. Last year he's actually had money to spend, and he's doing an interview. The whole story is just an interview he's doing with an unnamed reporter. I just like to fancy it's Arta Beloff. Why not? And he's just talking about like, my career, this and that. And it goes off in this dark turn where he talks about this one concert and how he met a certain individual at that concert, and just the whole diving into this interview, this story he tells. It just I don't know. I guess I would describe it as gripping. It's a gripping story. He also mentions in his interview how like in his concerts he likes to like. Not execute, sacrifice like goats and cats. It's like a stage thing. It's all fake, but it's all part of the show. He even triggered like a meme on TikTok where people would pretend to sacrifice family cats in like closets, which is totally something I could see happening in real life. And he goes on about like, some kid also legitimately killed their cat, like for real, and that bummed me out. I'm like, I could see it going too far also, but that's neither here nor there. He's just talking about like during this one concert, among the sea of goths and people wearing stage robes and all that, he just spots one person kind of near the front. Just one stands out. It's just this goth chick with like green lipstick, and like she just really stands out. He just knows. He's just like, I'm gonna get with that girl. And he gets with a lot of girls. He's popular now. He's a big superstar. No, I almost forgot. He shouts to the audience, like, are there any real witches out there? And it gets this, obviously he knew there was going to be, like, a big cheer. He's like, are there any real witches out there? And, he's just hyping them up. But it's like right after that he notices this girl. That's when he notices the girl with the green lipstick. So it's after the show, and he's just signing autographs and merchandise like he always does, and he's getting tired of this angle. He's got a long line. People are just telling him, "Oh, your music saved my life." He's kind of like, "I've heard it all." That's when the girl with the green lipstick reappears, and he just starts talking to her. He's hitting it off with her. He's used to getting numbers from girls like this. And he realizes, man, were we talking for so long that the long line behind her just suddenly dispersed? When did that happen? It's eerie, because, like, he throws all these people here, and then all of a sudden he's like, where'd they go? I guess we were talking for a while. And then he's like, hey, can I get your number? Or, let's hang out later. And she's like, no, let's hang out right now. You're free, right? He's like, when he wants to get with her. He's like, sure. So he leaves the show. It's done. He's going out with her, walking down the road at night, going to his apartment. Her name is Shelter, by the way. Goth girl name, Shelter. And there's this black cat following them. He's like, you got a fan there? And it's like, yeah, that cat's been following me for a while. I'm not sure what he's up to, but he's been following me for some reason. So, ominous, eerie. And he takes Shelter back to his apartment. And naturally, things get steamy there, and they're going at it. And he basically... I'm just recounting it. It's just so much better to just read it. He basically just gets roofied. Like, he drinks, like, a witch potion. Like, you drink this. Get in my lake. It's got candy. Drink this. He drinks it. He's, like, paralyzed. He can't move. And then she's just... Oh, son, you done something wrong if you're got paralyzed, and the goth chick is like carving you up, saying like, yeah, you're a poser, because she's like grilling into him all of a sudden, like, this whole persona you got going just to get with the ladies, isn't it? Like, you're not a real witch, are you? Huh? It's like, oh yeah, so that's a real witch right there. So she puts a witch curse on him. She's like licking his blood, chanting, drawing an actual pentagram around him. He's like so certain he's gonna die. And she puts a curse on him. It's like, everything that can go wrong will go wrong with your upcoming world tour. It's like he's really about to like really launch off now, but it's all gonna go wrong. This curse, all your bandmates are gonna get sick. The tour bus is gonna need repairs. You're just gonna get screwed unless you sacrifice this cat that's been following me. And the cat just like curls up next to him, and he's just like what? And she leaves, Shelter's gone, he's just like stuck like that. And he's like, she leaves instructions too, like, I'm leaving instructions for you on how to like properly do the ritual, your choice, the cat or your career. And he's just like stunned there. And then that's how he concludes the story with the for the interview he's giving. But he also says for the interview, like, this is the first time I've told this story to anyone, and like, it's make of it what you want. I haven't told anyone else about this before. I am a poser. I don't care how this affects my credibility, my career, what it does to me. I just want the story out there. I am a poser. Everyone's right. I'm just a provocateur. I'm nothing. He's kind of messed up from the experience. And then it ends with like the interviewer like, well, I mean, you're about to go off on your world tour, so I mean, do I have to ask, like, off the record, like the cat? And it just ends, and he's like, I prefer the term sacrificed, and that's on the record. So it's a metal read. I really enjoyed it. It's even got these cute upside down crosses, like in the text, like right before, like in the segments. It is my favorite story. This was my favorite story. Vanta Black is definitely the best, just for what it is. It is the best. But by my taste, just my experience reading this Hexen and the Real Witch was my favorite. Oh snap, I'm looking at the paperback now. The little crosses I like aren't in paperback, they're little boxes. I was reading the PDF at work, so looks like, I don't know if that's just my copy or not. But let me find my favorite line really quick. Okay, here we go. Hexen had options. He'd quickly gone from a skinny nerd that nobody wanted to touch to one of the most desirable, sickly white men on Earth. It's a good line. It's the best line of the book. Next is Portraits of St. Kevin's by Shan. This is the last story I feel I didn't get the proper reading of. I skimmed the ending, so I shouldn't really assess this one. From what I gathered, this is just a story of, here's this really old castle. It's not haunted. It's kind of going into what makes something haunted, I think. I don't want to speak for this one. There's these little asides in it about what may have happened here or has happened here. Again, it didn't sink in with me, so I'm not going to speak for this one. You might like it more than I did. That's how I'm going to pitch it. I'll return to this one like the water nymph, but years later. I'll come back to this when I'm ready for it, I guess. Not that I have anything against first person. I will give this one props for not being first person. I just don't write for first person. But most of the stories in this are first person and they're fine, but hooray, this one isn't. Next we got The Sub by Orlik Zarian. Orlick Zarian. Orlok Dundarian. I like this one. It's pitched as a 3-cigarette story, a concept I never heard of because I'm boring. I don't smoke. Which is, I guess, to explain is, hey, give me a story so good I can smoke 3 cigarettes to it. And this is what this is. There's these brothers. One's moving away, so he asks his brother, tell me a 3-cigarette story before I go. You got it. He gets his 3-smoke story is what it's called, a 3-smoke story. I'm very fond of how this one is written. It's written, it's very dialogue heavy, with the brother mostly just telling his story, and the brother just going along with it, nodding his head. And it is reminiscent of Plato's The Republic, in which the great philosopher Socrates is going on about his autistic point, and everyone else in the Discord chat is just going, I see, you are correct, exactly. It's just, that's what the brother's doing. It's like, I get it, yeah, I gotcha, proceed. And the brother continues the story. It's got a nice flow to it. The story the brother is telling is about the former roommate, you could say, before his brother moved in with him. It was this girl, his friend's girlfriend, needed a place to stay due to some circumstances. She got into a fight, couldn't stand to live with her other roommates. He's like, just let her live with me, it'll be cool. And of course it's not cool, because this leads to something. Oh yes, infidelity, of course, ultimately. But prior to that, he just recounts these bizarre sounds he's hearing, just some weird stuff coming from her room. Like the door's broken, so it can never shut all the way, and he just hears. It's genuinely, I gotta tell you, it is genuinely weird, the story this guy tells, because he's talking about how this girl was. He thought she was cheating on the boyfriend because he could hear someone going at it with her, like a man's voice. And he goes in there and she's alone. He's like, I thought I caught you cheating. And he's like looking around. There's no other guy there. And he's like, you were making those voices? You can make man's voices, and you're doing this BDSM stuff with yourself. And she like explains like she's into like choking. So like she's this crazy chick, and it just keeps getting crazier. And it just eventually, like, to cut to it, you know, she gets nude, and this is weird. This is weird to recount. I need 3 cigarettes here. This is exactly why I like this story. Like, after the trees, this is the next one that's just truly weird. Like, this is pure weird fiction. This guy's bizarre experience about how, like, he's looking at her nether regions, and this is why it's also true horror, just the vague description of a vagina. It's like, do I have to keep reading this? I don't like this. And it's just, he's like, I'm seeing little people in there, and then, like, you know, eventually they're going at it, and, like, he believes there's this other guy in the room, like pushing him into her or whatever. It's just so freaky. And it's not so much actually what he thinks happened, but what I adore about this story is just this retelling to his brother. And, you know, he's like, I've never told anyone this. And this is like, you know, because you're leaving, I guess I can tell you what actually went down in your room. Oh, it's so weird, too, because, like, he talks about how, like, he blacked out when this other guy showed up, and he just woke up in another parking lot. And it's like, what happened that night? It's just... But this is the whole thing. This is a story. Like, not the story he's telling, but, like, the story itself in this book. It is the essence of how people are out there, and they just have a story to them. Just that one day when they're looking out to sea, and they're like, yeah, there was this time. It's like the detective at the bar story. It's the sailor on the ship deck story. It is just... We all have in us, I think, one story of the truly bizarre, the supernatural, the unexplainable, as he puts it in this one, the unexplainable. And we maybe tell it once to someone. And the whole gotcha of this story, how it ends, is just how the brother is like, he never brings it up again. Like, we might have something we tell someone, and that's it. We told it once, we never tell it again. The author, Zarian here, he totally gets it. I get it. I get what he was going for. Like, just that one story we all got. Or people out there can have. If not everyone has one, it's because it's got to be really profound and freaky. Just a chance with the unexplainable. I like this one. Just for that, and just for being weird. Read this one, because my retelling of a retelling is not gonna cut it. Guess it could also just be a ghost story, but that would be stupid. I choose not to believe that. After that, we have I Waterboard Clowns for a Living by Flower Shop. Flower Schlock. Flower Slop. This would be the third story that just delves into the really weird, deal with it kind of weird. It is about a miserable schizo, and his job. It's just what the title is. It's just a guy whose job is to waterboard clowns. Why? Then we'll deal with it. And it's novel for how it's just super detailed. He's just telling you how his job goes, how his job works. It's almost like you're being hired to do the job. He's just going through it, and how he hates it. He hates his job, and the whole thing is just a metaphor for how much it sucks to work for a living. And I guess the comedic angle of it is it's funny because he thinks his wagey job is torture, having to stand on his feet and like press a hose for 8 hours. It's funny because he's like, my job is torture, and his job is to literally torture clowns who are begging him to stop. And there's also the twist at the end where it's like he has a crush on this jester girl that performs in front of a joke shop he eats his Subway in front of. And he's very copy about it. Like, my job is to waterboard clowns, but my job doesn't define me. Like, I deal with my job enough at work. That's a jester girl over there. I'm allowed to like her. She's a jester. Not a clown, jester. I don't waterboard jesters. So he's like constantly living in fear when he goes to bed. He's like, am I going to wake up and is the girl I like going to be strapped down on that table I waterboard people at? This story is a nice parallel to The Trees, because in The Trees we have a schizo living in the city who's just afraid of the forest, whereas this schizo, also living in the city, just wants to like move out into the forest because he thinks he's just working his job so he can just have enough money so he can afford to keep working his job. By the way, I just remembered under the table of contents where we have all these little descriptions about what the stories are. Under The Trees, the little description is around pines. Do not recline. You cannot say that. The Waterborne Clown's character is also kind of racist. He's like super obsessed with like everyone's race. Like, oh, my coworker's a Slav. His name's Greg. Oh, the girl I like, she's definitely French. And he's like bad-mouthing Filipinos he has to drive by. Our next story is The Marlin Spike by Miles McNaughton, the author from Tales of the Unreal Volume 1 who wrote Twin Candles, the story that was mercilessly bullied. Rightfully. No, that story in the first volume was just guilty of not having a very strong hook in the beginning. This one has a very good hook in the beginning. A marlin spike of a hook. I also don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I've never even seen the word marlin spike before. To those who would have criticized Twin Candles, I would say McNaughton redeems himself with The Marlin Spike. This is a ghost story, a very by-the-book kind of ghost story. We follow our main character, Michael Hansen, at the lake with his wife and his son swimming in the lake, who he can't keep his eyes off of because he's just paranoid his son's going to drown or something's going to happen. He just can't look away. And like the second he does, like what do you know, his son starts like, splashing and drowning. He runs out to go save his son, and he recovers his son, but he finds there's like this rash around his ankle, like something was grabbing onto him. And his son, he says, I was just grabbing this underwater, and it's a rusty marlin spike with the initials of MJH, Michael James Hansen. And our main character knows exactly what this is. This is an item from his past. And so it is when he leaves the lake that night. He's at this bar, drinking his sorrows, troubled, really. He's not reminiscing, he's more haunted by this event that took place 10 years ago. There's a very nice creepy scene where he's at the bar, the bartender has walked away, and the lights are being weird, and he just sees in the mirror just some hunched figure in the booth behind him. And the figure moves over and sits next to him at the bar, and he just sees like the figure's head is caved in. There's like a severed eyeball just staring off indifferently into the space, and he just drops his glass. He's like, I gotta go home. I remember realizing early on this is just a generally nicely written story. It's just like, oh, look at me, I'm absorbed, I'm aware I'm into what I'm reading. And I'm very engrossed. I'm reading about this fishing trip from 10 years ago, about how Hansen was out fishing in the Pacific with his buddy Reggie. And then Reggie sets up the ultimate just please murder me scenario because Reggie was the one who was talking about marrying Hansen's future wife. They both like the same girl, and he's like, I'm gonna propose to Maggie next week. You know the girl you like? The girl that you once dated? Well, I'm going to ask her to marry me, and I'm going to do it on the Golden Gate Bridge. You know, the spot you and the spot you and her made special, her special spot with you. Well, I'm gonna take that, and then she's gonna have my child. And it's just, they're just drinking rum and it's like thundering out, and this guy just doesn't shut up. And just Hansen decides, wait a second. Like, he just feels super inferior. Like, well, you're the better man and all. drink up, have some rum. And he just keeps going. It keeps escalating. It escalates well. And then just Reggie doesn't shut up, and Marlon and Hansen's like, here, Marlon spike to the head. It's a murder on the high waters story. The body will go over the waters. It's the perfect, easily set up for him crime. But it haunts him for 10 years. It's 10 years later. He's haunted. He's the one that Hansen married Maggie. She's had his son. They have a family together, and this is a paying the price sort of story where it's like, yes, you got the girl, Hansen, but now Ghost Reggie is back to take your son. You reap what you sow. It's paying the price. The story. It's got a very, very nice punch in the gut kind of ending too, with the eyeball coming into play again, looking off indifferently. It's a nice ghost story. Worth your read. I also think back to the bar scene where he's drinking his rum there, and then right before the ghost appears, this rum just turns into a brackish water, and he's spitting it out. It's full of nice details like that. Now we move on to Stampede of the Protestants by Zulu Alitspa Apurasta, the Ecuadorian mercenary who writes one story for every person he kills. Stampede of the Protestants is what I would say, it's the fourth and final of the truly weird stories. The story that I feel encapsulate just pure weird. A man awakes one day and finds that in his apartment, his laundry room has been converted into a convenience store. A convenience store he can't even access. There's a glass door that he can't get open, and he can just see, he can only see through it, and there's a close sign, and he can just see the merchandise there, and it's just a dimly lit, closed convenience store. What a thing to wake up to. He walks out of his apartment, he goes to see his neighbor, he's like, anything weird with your apartment? And the neighbor is like, why, yes, I have a pizza parlor in my apartment. They check it out, and sure enough, there is a clear door which cannot be opened with a close sign to a pizza parlor. Another neighbor has a laundromat herself that she can't access. And maybe we should talk to the manager of the apartment. And there's a long line down there, and everyone's complaining what if the rooms in our house just have this inaccessible room? What's going on? And they discover that it's a global phenomenon. They feel oh, it's all across the city. All the repair shops are getting calls about this. But no, this is a global phenomenon where only in residential houses, there's just these miraculously appeared, inaccessible general stores that are just all closed. And it's very high concept stuff. It is weird. The main character himself is pretty paranoid. He's very worried. What am I imagining? I've never even seen my neighbor before. Am I just imagining the neighbor? It's a good read. It's a good read. And it's kind of like Vantablack, where it's just making you think about what's going on. It reminds me of basically an SCP that just got loose. Some kind of dumb SCP that just broke out of containment. And now everyone's got a stupid, inaccessible, convenient room in their house. And throughout, there's build-up throughout. It makes you think more and more. He comes up with a scheme. What if I flip the circuit breaker? Would that activate the light in the room? It's such a good story for making you think about what really is, how did this happen? What would cause this? And, I think about stuff like this sometimes. Just what if something truly magical and inexplainable just happened? If I just spoke a stupid scenario into reality, how would the scientists cope? And that's really what I wanted to dig my teeth into with this story, because it's just so neat. They talk about they did some scans. There's apparently an unknown type of gas in these rooms. Apparently that's not glass. That's a whole other type of material we've never known about. It's super interesting, but then it doesn't really go anywhere relating to what we're focused on. Zulu just sort of pivots at the end, and it's just kind of a random ending where Stampede of Protestants, I guess. Main character's wait a second, am I a Baptist? I'm a Protestant, right? Whatever. And he just for no reason, mind you, he just gets naked and just starts running and jogging outside, and people are just so baffled with what's going on. They're yeah, screw it, and they all get naked and They all just start running naked together in a stampede. I don't doubt there's some sort of meaning or point, actually, to the whole stampede part, but honestly, I mean, I wanted payoff or more about the, unmanned magical rooms. It just reminds me of what happened in Traffic Stop, which is the first story from Tales of the Unreal Volume 1. It's a good story, also by Zulu. It's just kind of like a whatever ending, and it's like, okay. At least it's a cool story up until the ending. Also, I like to imagine, the main character's name is Greg, so I like to imagine this is just Greg from I Waterboard Clowns for a Living. They're all just like loosely interconnected stories, kind of like that parallel stuff going on. That'd be really cool if you got 17 authors like this, and they all just kind of collaborated. Like, each one just had some sort of clue that explains something in a different story, and if like, oh, that connection, oh, that explains that. That would be cool if you had like a dozen authors. I mean, they're all telling their own stories, but they're looking at what the others are writing. That'd be cool. That'd be a cool thing to do. Entering the final stretch, we have Night Shift by Ogden Nesmere, who I will refer to as Nessie, who I believe wrote a book called Eggplant, I think. I actually don't have too much to say about Night Shift. It's very short, and it's well written. Nessie has a very good writing style. I call it a gut punch style, where there's just kind of like a setup, and there's such a defeating like payoff follow-up line. Our main character, he works night shift at a convenience store. He's been there way too long, longer than all the other, like even the younger supervisors than him. Here's one of the gut punch lines. He effectively gets a liquor bottle smashed on his head by hoodlums. His manager says he wasn't covered for that kind of injuries that he sustained, and anyways, the security cameras weren't on, he had said. So, it's fun of, like, cynical, like, writing like that. I really like it. There's also this strange basement below the convenience store, and I think we all know about some place we've been or worked at where there's just some strange basement down there that we've never actually been to, and the main character sort of is trying to break into there by the end. And it's not the weirdest story for weird fiction. It's well written, it is fine, but it's not convenience store in my laundry room kind of weird. But it does take place in a convenience store, and it's well written. The main character, from their perspective, it's just they're so cynical. It's just a cynical perspective. It's still fun. Do I even know what weird fiction constitutes? Because I keep putting just the concept of something freaky and weird on a high pedestal. I don't know. And we've reached the end with the great story Title by Lapis Lazuli from Steven Universe. See, did you know I actually contributed to Tales of the Unreal Volume 2? I saw that from the PDF file that they didn't change the last title in the book. They left it as a placeholder title, and I called it out with Walter White screaming, "Title, page 137!" That was me. See, I helped. I helped with this. But I had already ordered 3 copies of the book, so now I have a paperback version where the last story says Title at the end. I just feel good that I corrected that. Hopefully, I believe they addressed it immediately. Now I have these rare limited edition versions of Tales of the Unreal Volume 2. Anyways, the true last story in the book is called Mouths by Louise Lapin. We have a very good story to end on here, because I feel, with all the parallels that I've mentioned already in the stories, throughout the stories, this is a very strong parallel to the Water Nymph. Whereas the Water Nymph has a early 20th century Lovecraftian feeling to it, Mouths is completely written through emails exchanged between a brother and a sister, or rather just the emails of the brother. So that's a very interesting medium, and it's a much more, modern sort of feeling to the story, to the horror at hand here. We're not reading diary or journal entries, we're looking at emails of a man that's just progressively losing control of a bad situation. Now, our main character is a undocumented migrant living in the United States. I believe it's the United States. And he's just emailing his sister, like, I'm getting a job here, I'm going to try and get a job here, send some money to you guys so you guys can worry a little less, and God willing, you can come live with me. So he's going to do the grind, the American dream. And he's talking about how he gets a job at a restaurant, there's this cute a Croatian cutie there, hitting it off with her, and eventually he notices, in the basement, he's talking about in the email, I was in the basement and I noticed by the dryer there's just a hole in the ground. Just a little hole. And it was weird. I threw a nickel down there and just no sound, just kept on going. Weird. And as the emails progress, as he's acclimating to his new job at this restaurant, he emails his sister. He says, hey, I sent you a package, things are good, hopefully you get it. But as the emails progress, he goes, well, there's the funny thing, more holes in the basement, and there's these little white things around them. I think they're teeth. So there's basically mouths like leading into like voids in the basement. And eventually it gets a little too strange for him. He gets his the apartment manager, his landlord, to come and take a look. And the landlord's like, "Yeah, that's pretty freaky." Like he's like trying to scrape it off the wall, and it just he drops the scraper into the void. And like, pretty weird. No, they actually do break one off of the wall, but like they have like a severed like interdimensional mouth. So like if you stuck your finger through it, it wouldn't come out the other end. It's they're very composed for that discovery. But I guess he gets the point because the landlord's like, "Stay put. You go get some gasoline. I'll stay here. You get some gasoline. We're gonna burn these things. What else do you do, really?" And this gets good. He comes back with the materials, and he sees the landlord on the ground with his head is severed. But it's not like cut off with blood splattered everywhere. The void, the mouse didn't bite his head off, or they did, but he goes down to inspect the body, and right around the neck, it's just flat skin. It's there's no wound. It's just rounded at the neck with no head. His vitals are still going. He's still alive. He's still got a beating heart, but the head is gone. So freaky. So our main character gets rid of the body, and then he eventually realizes I can keep these mouths under control if I start feeding them. So he's effectively starving himself by this point, like just feeding them like the cheapest of meats from the grocery store, just throwing meat into these holes to keep them going. But it's still not enough because the holes they're spreading, they're getting bigger, and they're always just sucking air, waiting for something to come into them. He eventually starts taking leftovers from work, and he gets out of hand. He gets so out of hand, he's stealing from work. He's like taking frozen beef from the restaurant freezer to feed these holes, and he gets caught and he gets fired for it. But he makes the best of it. He's like, well, you know what? Things happen for a reason. Because he was talking to the Croatian girl afterwards, and she's like, "You can move in with me," because they got a thing going at this point. And he's like, "Well, shoot, I would love to get out of this apartment and move in with you. Things are looking up." And like the rules of how this is working are just fascinating because like the holes are like eating his furniture. Like they're not spread throughout the house; they're all contained in the basement. But he wakes up on the floor because they ate the bed. Like he's just losing all his furniture, which freaks out the Croatian girl when she comes over to like help him pack up. Like, "Where's all your stuff?" And it's not the happiest ending either. Like the door to the basement gets sucked off, and it's not a happy ending. I would say just go read it. I won't say how it ends, and even it gets grimmer than you think it can get too. But again, this kind of reminds me of Stampede of the Protestants because this feels like an SCP story almost. Like this is just an SCP gone loose, and it's a bit more harmful than what Zulu was writing about. But going back to stories like Vantablack and The Sub, this is another one of those stories that just makes you think about what's going on. That's what I like about SCPs. It makes you think, like, what's really going on to make this thing tick and work. The main character loses a body part. He loses part of himself, and it's just flesh around, like, where his body ends, and he can still feel it. He can feel it wherever it's gone to. Like, he can feel himself being digested. It's metal. Oh, it's so cool, too. Like, when he loses his fingers, he can only type with one hand. So you're wondering, like, is he going crazy? Why is his email getting so like poorly written? Why are there so many vowels missing? It's like, oh yeah, he just doesn't have the fingers to type anymore. Oh, this is another one you gotta read. And that's Tales of the Unreal Volume 2. And of those 17 stories, I would say only 4 are truly like weird, like italicized, bold, trademarked weird. So if you want to read something that just comes off as weird, those 4 stories would be The Trees, The Sub, I Waterboard Clowns for a Living, and Stampede of the Protestants. If you want to read 3 stories, if you want to feel like you're digging into the occult to read the 3 stories that I couldn't really get a hold on, then read Sleep of the Diviner, Saccharin, and Portraits of St. Kevin's. And I just noticed that those 3 stories are the 3 authors who have one name for their pen name, so I don't know if there's a correlation there, but go ahead and give them a shot. Maybe you'll like them more than I did. The rest are generally good stories. Definitely consider reading this if you have the off time. Like, I was reading this a bit at work, so if you're just at work and you're bored, please, this is a book you should just kill some time with. There's some good stuff here. Of the 2 stories you should go out of your way to read, 2 really good stories in this book. You need to read Vantablack and Hexen and the Real Witch. Those are my 2 standouts. Those I would definitely recommend you look into. Hopefully there'll be a volume 3 in the future with other interesting and weird tales to get into. I didn't mean for this to be an hour long. I thought I could do this in 20 minutes. So join me next time when we discuss Call of United Airlines, a book which may feature me as a Mexicanized character, just as I may be wired up on cocaine. Should be fun.